We have somehow pulled Pat Kerrane away from heat checking his Robert Woods love on Twitter to talk about our best ball exposures. We're about halfway through the fantasy football draft season, heading into July, heading into training camp. So it's a perfect time to level set on our exposures in all of the best ball drafts we've done so far, our structures, specific players, stacks, week 17, everything. We're going to go through a quick overview of both Pat and myself's exposure today on Legendary Sickos.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
I apologize already, Pat, for calling you out on Robert Woods, but I just saw your tweet this morning and it cracked me up. Particularly, lots of really funny comments. Your own tweet was very funny on Robert Woods, and technically, that's kind of what the point of this show is players that we like, structures that we like, stacks, teams, whatever that we like, that are right. Who you like is who you're drafting. We can talk. We can do Twitter threads every single day about a player. If you're not, actually drafting that player, overweight that player, or whatever, do you actually really like them? So this show today will be a little more. I don't want to say practical because I think they're all kind of practical, and this is still a little bit theoretical, but you'll kind of see behind the scenes. And I have some crazy huge ownership on players right now. And so I thought the Robert Woods point was kind of funny, but he is a player. Sam Howell is a player that I like. Robert Woods is a player that you like that maybe I don't like as much. So we have some differing opinions, but this is a fun part of the offseason before training camp gets here I try to do this to myself because it's hard. You're drafting so many teams, you're just in the flow to be like, let me look at my exposures and make sure, these are actually aligning with what I want to do this summer.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, the Robert Woods thing is funny. It's Twitter, so it's like one of these things where you're on Twitter long enough to be like, there's no way I can caveat this enough to not get crushed. So let me just get crushed. And in the tweet, I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm gonna get crushed for even hinting that he might be a good pick. And I sure did. I got crushed. But one caveat that's kind of funny, and I recognize that underdog's not available in every state, and people still want to play their fantasy football, but the character limits, the caveat I probably should have found a way to squeeze in there is this is a best ball take. Because I did get some you're never going to want to start him. I'm like, that's right. I won't.
That is a fact. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would never take him on a non-best ball team. But, So, yeah, that one was kind of funny. But I am drafting Robert Woods. I have quite a bit of him. It kind of fits with the late round philosophy that I'm kind of leaning on a little bit more this year for early drafts, which is that, I'm probably not going to be very good at deciphering this true uncertainty, three-way coin flip type of backfield situations. And I just want to go to a guy who's got $10 million guaranteed. And, everyone's saying well, he's the third guy in the target pecking order. We don't know that, we don't know anything, right? So uncertain situation, completely free arbitrage on Adam Thielen, who I'm hard fading. So it's if there's an old dusty guy who actually is worth drafting this year, maybe it's the guy I take in the 18th instead of the guy everyone else is taking on the 12th.
It is kind of funny with the Woods situation where, look, I mean, I'm not some big Robert Woods stan. I don't draft him a ton, but it's actually not because I don't think he's in the discussion as a late round wide receiver. I've drafted him a couple times. I think one of the most recent teams I posted to Twitter actually had Robert Woods as the last pick, and I didn't post it to talk about Robert Woods. People. He just happened to be on that team. And even I got a couple of tweets it was really good until 18th round Robert Woods, or whatever. And I'm like, geez, even I can, me, a very anti that type of a player, can see that him in the 18th round seems, whether you like it or are neutral about it or whatever, it shouldn't be the reason that you think the team sucks is with Robert Woods on there. So I do think that is all funny, particularly with how we've seen the market chase up an Adam Thielen. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins still goes in the early fourth round of drafts. I'm not trying to compare Robert Woods to DeAndre Hopkins, but that's an old player who's not on a team who we were hoping he was dropped in that ADP bucket because we were hoping the Chiefs or the Bills or someone like that were going to sign him. Now we have no idea. It's probably the Patriots or the Titans seem to be the most likely suitors, but you know, and so we're willing to do that. Last year, remember, Julio signs with the Bucks, and it's let's throw a party because Julio just signed with the Bucks, and now let's take him in the 9th round. And then Robert Woods is like, no, you can't draft that guy. What do you mean? I think that that's kind of funny. Really quick before we start to dive in, though, because normally we are not capped for time. If you've never listened before, go back and listen to some of the past episodes, because I can definitely be long-winded, and we're also getting into fun conversations that can take a little time. Today, we are a little bit more hard capped on time. I do want to make sure I hit our promotion before the 2.5 hour
wow,
podcast.
look at this. Look at this.
I never write anything down. I literally wrote this down this time, and I'm putting a fucking sticky note right in front of my face when we record so that I remember I don't read this promotion 2.5 hours into the show. If you subscribe to Pat's Legendary Upside, we have a fun special promotion for you. Pat has a bunch of other goodies, so you're just getting all sorts of free stuff if you sign up for Pat's subscription, which is incredibly cheap. But if you're a best ball player, which obviously this show is geared towards best ball, Spike Week is the place bringing you a lot of the best ball tools. We actually put in an insane, awesome update to our draft hacker overlays last night. We're not going to get into the draft hacker today. But if you're drafting in the weekly winners, new format, which I'm sure Pat and I will discuss at some point this summer, we put a really, really fun update into the overlays for weekly winners. It's ready to rock and roll for all things Best Ball Mania, etc. And then today you're going to see our Draft IQ product. I'll probably pull mine up. Maybe Pat will pull his up a time or two throughout the course of this. These are all the types of best ball tools on top of rankings and some other tools that you get with a Spike Week subscription. And if you are subscribed to Legendary Upside, you get 40% off. So if you want to subscribe for the whole NFL season, be able to see your teams during the season, be able to get playoff best ball content, in-season best ball content, you can subscribe through the whole season. We also have a monthly package, which is regular $40 a month. You will get 40% off using promo code LEGUP. There's a little promo code button you click when you go to checkout. Just put leg up in there. You'll get your 40% off. And you have to be a Legendary Upside subscriber. So if you're not going to get this discount.
But you can fix that by going to legendaryupside.com/early.
If you're not
$10 for your first year.
Exactly. If you're not right now, you spend a very limited amount of money on Pat subscription, and you get it all back if you're a best ball player, and then some, if you're a best ball player. So I do think biased, but it's a pretty sweet little promotion for folks playing best ball. I mean, fantasy football, subscribe to what Pat's doing anyway. But if you're playing best ball, I think you'll find that the combination of the things Pat is bringing you alongside the tools can be very powerful. So really quickly, we're talking about player exposure, our portfolios, and some of that stuff. It's really easy to get into individual players or should you draft an elite quarterback or whatever. But the higher level that's hardest, I think, to implement is I want to do this with my portfolio, or I want to take a stand on this player, or I want to be about neutral on this player. And then you get in the drafts. They are snake drafts. You don't get to select every player that you want. And sometimes your portfolio doesn't look maybe necessarily like your plan. So what I wanted to bring up first was what kind of has been your general plan of attack, whether you have got it exactly how you wanted in your exposures. What has been your kind of general plan of attack in terms of, are there certain players that you're hammering? Are there certain structures that you're hammering? And then the inverse, are there certain things that you're avoiding at this point in time during the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been, so to me, it's sort of about the player pool is going to dictate the plan of attack. And, with the point of Woods or Thielen or those guys, right? The reason that I'm closed off to Thielen is because what I need out of a 12th round pick, I think, is different than what I need out of an 18th round pick. I think through things like that. It's not just oh, this player is overpriced. It's taking this player in this range. I need them to be this type of hit, or that's sort of what I feel like I'm betting on. So I have a big stand against Najee Harris, and it's because I think that if I'm taking a running back in the 4th round, 3rd or 4th round, I still want them to be, able to have a really, really high end season. And Harris had quite good rookie season, but he had an 86% snap share that season. I don't think he has any real chance of getting there this year unless Jaylen Warren gets hurt. So it's kind of a contingent bet. You know, he could certainly be a league winner. But to me, I'm like, what is that? If I need like probably and it could be like a multi-week hamstring pull for Warren in the playoffs and Harris crushes. So it doesn't have to be like a season-ending thing because they'll have enough volume to kind of chug along and help you if you structure your team right. So, you know, if Harris was a 5th round pick, you know, if he was like Aaron Jones versus Harris, I would be a lot more interested. But so it's just sort of like, what does this round sort of ask for and what does this player get? And then you can kind of cobble that all together and sort of see, okay, what can I get later in the draft, right? So if it's like, you know, Travis Kelce probably gives you what you need in the first round for that selection. But we're in a world where you can get Mark Andrews in the late 3rd round or mid to late 3rd round. You can sit there where you would take Kelce and feel confident that you can get Andrews 2 full rounds later. You can also skip Andrews and sit there and get Pitts 3 full rounds after that, right? Or Goddard.
And he's even going in the 7th now a lot of the time. His ADP is falling into the 70s, Kyle Pitts is.
Yeah, so you can play for a 7th round Pitts. I mean, as much as I like Kelce, I'd rather have 7th round Pitts. As much as I like Mark Andrews, I'd rather have 7th round Pitts.
Kittle's going in the 60s in most drafts now. So I found that to be fascinating too. I didn't have a plan. This is such a perfect thought process. I had no plans coming into this year to be like, I'm going to be really light Travis Kelce. Like, it wasn't my plan. I mean, if you said that to me, you're like, he's getting old. I'd like to cash in my Kelce chips before it all falls apart. I would say totally fine. I totally respect that. And that thought has crossed my mind too, but it wasn't my intention. Travis Kelce you want to talk about the guy who could most easily be the guy you need? It's probably Travis Kelce. And so that's just generally not a guy I want to fade. But then you draft, like you said, then I just start doing a bunch of drafts, which will show some of mine. I'm, 200 plus drafts in on Underdog. And I just keep finding every time I take Travis Kelce, it's like, shit, I'm at pick 78 and Kyle Pitts is still here. I really wish I just would have taken Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs or whatever at that spot. Or George Kittle. Oh, God, pick 68. George Kittle fell all the way here. Darren Waller's here at pick 90.
Yeah.
Right? It happens all the time. And so it's not anything about Kelce. It's all about the environment, like you said, and what can happen later in the draft.
Yeah, and I think that then creates like the kind of the, like in some ways sort of structures that I want to, or tactics, let's say, that I want to be overweight on. And one of those this year is definitely the elite tight ends. I think, you want to be aware of what the overall market sentiment is on kind of structures. And, I just think that elite tight end represents a potentially massive edge this season. I think people don't really understand this format fully, to be honest. Like, we have 3 uncorrelated tournaments that you need to win. Madison Parkhill did some interesting work on his site, which you guys should check out. I linked to it in my elite tight end piece on Legendary Upside. You can just check out his Substack as well. But he talks about how, yes, the odds of George Kittle doing what he did last year aren't great for George Kittle specifically. And George Kittle, what he did was he had a big week 15, really big week 16, just absolutely powered teams to the week 17 final with those spike weeks. But because we have a 3 straight uncorrelated tournaments and the elite tight ends capture a huge percentage of the spike weeks available at the tight end position, then the odds that some elite tight end, that one elite tight end goes off during those three playoff weeks, at least once, is pretty good. It's like 80% or something was his calculation that we get like at least one of those guys going off for at least one of the weeks. And when that happens, might not happen, but if it does, we do know that the nature of the position, because it's so low scoring, because many of the other elite elite tight ends that we're going to be drafting are going to completely bust, then you're going to get a ton of leverage. And so the thing is about elite tight end is it doesn't feel very, it's a strategy that doesn't like inherently feel good, because when you're overweight all the elite tight ends, what you're kind of doing is you're saying like many of my teams are going to suck because this tight end's going to bust. But the ones that don't suck are going to be like potentially awesome. And then there's teams that like don't suck, but just kind of like, yeah, they aren't, the elite tight end isn't helping. You're going to feel like, I wish I spent that pick differently. But then that elite tight end happens to be the guy who goes off in the playoffs. So maybe you advance those at a slightly worse rate, but you have this huge leverage piece. And I think that's, you know, when you tell someone, hey, here's a strategy where it's going to probably hurt your advance rate, but you're going to get this really impossible to predict spike week, probably. No one wants to do it, but I just think it's a really big edge right now, in part because we've seen it play out now. We've seen it play out literally the last 2 years. Mark Andrews was an absolute must-have player, and George Kittle, second highest finals advance rate behind Justin Jefferson, if I recall correctly. So it's a weird thing in fantasy football when something works this well and the market moves against it hard. And that's what's happening. I think that part of it, that the market is like, elite tight end is dead. It's Kelsey or no one. After a year in which Kittle was on the winning lineups across a number of different sites, including drafters, including the season-long format. He was on that team, not Kelsey. So the market said, you can't draft Kittle, you can't draft Pitts, you can't draft Andrews. They're going like a round to 2 rounds lower than what we would have priced them at probably in 2020 or even maybe last year. And I know I've talked about elite tight end before on this, but that is one of the structures where if I look at like the overall macro landscape of what drafters, how drafters are interpreting information that we've gotten over the last couple of years, applying it to this year's player pool, I just think it's like a huge miss, you know, from on a macro level that we decided that elite tight end isn't one of the most powerful levers you can pull. Now, does that mean I never punt tight end and that I don't like punting tight end sometimes? Like I do. If you're a real big believer in 3 late round tight ends, like I think that can work, and I've done it myself. You literally can't draft elite tight end on every team. Your portfolio would be whacked. Right. But it is something that I want to really like the more, and I wrote this elite tight end article like a month ago or whatever. And since then tight end prices have fallen further. So that's another thing with these exposures. You always want to be checking in with yourself. Like, I had this take, I've been executing on this take. What has happened since? Like, has the market shifted against me? Should I reconsider that? Maybe it was a good idea then, and now it's not, right? It doesn't mean you were wrong, although you certainly could have been. But, you don't have to like crush yourself for doing something before that you're now no longer going to do. We want to be flexible and nimble and be pivoting when things change. But this is one of those things where I'm also comfortable doubling down. Markets decided that nope, not only is, were we kind of out on elite tight end, but we read Pat's piece and it sucked. We're not interested. We're not taking elite tight end. No matter what.
Really, that's what happened. There's a very high correlation between you releasing that article and Kyle Pitts falling to the almost the 8th round.
The ADP's plummeted. I didn't convince anyone. So it's like, all right, fine. Like I told you what I'm going to do, and now I'm going to do it even more.
It's what was ringing through my head when you kind of mentioned that part, because it's kind of one of the hardest parts about exposure. And we recently talked about the Chris Evans, Samaje Perine, conundrum of 2022, where everybody said, this backup seems really valuable, but none of them are getting drafted, right? Joe Mixon getting old, pretty dusty. Amazing offense, particularly, by the way, for running backs. Joe Burrow's, affliction for checking down when I love the way they run their offense for fantasy. That's why the Bengals are so fun, right? It's like, single coverage on Chase. I'm going to go to him. Like literally no matter what. It doesn't matter. I'm going to throw the fade to Chase. Oh, mid play, the safety rolls over. instant check down, like instant. He makes one, maybe two reads, and then he's like, fuck it, check down, get my 4 or 5 yards. If it's more, great. If it's not, it's a winning play, right? He plays like a younger modern day Tom Brady, basically, who can run a little bit. So we established, hey, just a smidge more fun. Also not from, a Boston team. So we can all actually celebrate Joe Burrow instead of kind of fucking hating ourselves because Tom Brady is a thing. So Samaje Perine
years just like, dude, he's so handsome. That's all I want to talk about. How handsome
that does also piss me off, by the way. Like, God gave you everything. At least let you be just like average looking. You know what I mean? Like, this is how I feel about Lewis Hamilton. I'm gonna the qualifying for this F1 race is happening right now.
Lewis Hamilton, likable though.
That is the great thing about Lewis. Lewis gets it all back because he is the most likable, kind-hearted, good person of all time. Brady, not that likable. But also Lewis Hamilton, like, you're a supermodel looking dude, you're a billionaire, and you're the best race car driver of all time. Like, fuck off, man. Like, leave something for the rest of us. That is like, that is so unfair. It just life. Like, we're talking about fantasy football and grinding out Samaje Perine versus Chris Evans, and some of these guys live other lives. But it reminded me of that, but different. You mentioned, like, you get to this point, right, where I agree with you. You'll see my exposure here in just a minute to elite tight ends, because I do very much believe in like the punt 3 late round tight end approach. I've written about it in terms of some ways I'm particularly uniquely going about the late round tight end thing, because I do think all tight ends have been pushed down. Maybe not, like, for whatever reason we latch on to the tight end dead zone, and those guys never move. Like Ingram and Njoku and those guys, like, just stay around pick 100, no matter how far the elites.
It is weird, actually. Yeah.
Like, you're never going to get Evan Ingram outside, the top 100 or 105. He should probably go like 145. But like,
I legit think he should be like a 14th round, 15th round pick.
Yeah.
14th round, maybe.
It's particularly with the pricing, right? If the elites are falling and Hunter Henry and, Michael Mayer and Luke Musgrave and, like, whatever, pick your favorite late round tight end du jour, they're all going in the 18th. Why does he go in the 9th? Like, it's just that math doesn't add up. But hey, I think I took him once too. Literally knowing that is like, it's like, I didn't like necessarily set out to say I will never draft Evan Ingram, but when you plop him into the 9th round, given all the rest that's going on about tight end, because I like the Jags. The Jags offense looks great. Who the hell doesn't like the Jags? But I don't get many Jags because the market has said these prices are this. But the elite tight end thing was like, we talked about Perine versus Evans, where both of us and a lot of people, the beginning of last year, we saw the value in whoever was going to be the handcuff to Joe Mixon, right? Who couldn't see that? We were wrong, though. Like, wildly wrong. Chris Evans is probably not even an NFL football player. We were wrong. We tried to project the new young guy to step into a bigger role, which is fine. I don't think that's inherently wrong, but we were wrong in this situation. The veteran, steady Samaje Perine was the guy, and we adjusted.
I do think we were wrong. Like, I guess and we may be on slightly different pages here, so be curious for your pushback if there is any. But like I think maybe we were a little wrong in terms of process last year at the Chris Evans thing, because you're projecting a guy along with the rest of the market. You're taking a dude we're not sure that he's going to even have a job, and he's getting universally drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing that during a part of the offseason where we don't really have any reason to feel that confident. And so what you could do instead is just try to hit a single with that pick and trust that your good teams from those early parts of the year are going to have big value hits, but probably like earlier on. Like, let's say Deontay Foreman has a horrific training camp and is basically like, he tweaks his ankle. He's unsure if he's going to even be ready for week 1. He didn't impress the coaches, and Herbert just looks like it's his job to start the year. Herbert is not going to be like an 11th round pick anymore. Herbert might be a 7th round pick.
Right.
Something as simple as that, right? That's just one example, but we're going to get stuff like that. It's a chaotic sport. I think that you're going to tend to have your biggest value gains in spots like that, like where you're going to have a dude jump from the 13th round to the 8th or whatever. So those types of gains, you know, if I can almost protect those gains by taking Michael Mayer, who's completely free now as a third tight end, I'll take, sometimes I've done stuff like I'll take Andrews, Laporta, and Mayer, right? Like that's not necessarily a typical 3 tight end build when I have Andrews, but I'm like, I think Mayer's going to do something this year. I think he's
also a last round pick. He projects better than the wide receivers that go back there. You show me a wide receiver that technically has more, right? The point of drafting the other positions, running back might be a little different, but you run into the uncertainty. You run into the upside of the running back is better, but you run into a way more risk and uncertainty. Like the odds you actually hit on that guy are so low. Yeah. But then you're comparing Meyer to, I don't know, Marvin Jones, you know, like do they have more upside in a week than him? Not necessarily. So I do think the market is a little different in terms of even what you mentioned with that third tight end.
Yeah, and I would say, like, if you want to dive into the uncertainty at running back, I'm not doing it so much right now, but like have some courage, you know, take Zamir White, take
now we're talking
one of the Rams backs, take the guys who aren't getting drafted. Would be what I would suggest, where if you're just holding hands with the field, being like, we know it's, you know, this, who's a good example of a guy that like we've just anointed this year, the Chris Evans.
I mean, it was also on the Bengals and it was Chase Brown.
It was Chase Brown. You're right. It's Bengals again. Yeah. Chase Brown.
The Bengals again.
Yeah. We're just holding hands. It's Chase Brown. Chase Brown's the backup we need. We don't know that. In fact, we have evidence to the contrary that it's, that might in fact be Travion Williams. Yeah. Now you do have Mixon getting cut, but I've also talked about they're going to be a candidate to sign someone, even if the Mixon doesn't take the pay cut and gets cut. They're probably a Dalvin Cook or Leonard Fournette or Zeke destination. So
they're licking their chops right now with all these running backs still available and Dalvin still available because it's a win-win situation for them. Everything's fine with Mixon. They get him at the cost they want. He's not suspended, and they're good. They can still sign one of those guys to pair with Mixon, or worst case scenario, right? It goes bad with Mixon. Insert Dalvin Cook. Who gives a shit? What's the difference?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, if you want to hit a home run, right, it would be having one of these guys who. Now, keep in mind, I'm not really doing this, but I just think if you are going to go with the let's wait into the uncertainty, at least wait into uncertainty that would give you leverage on other early drafters. You know, it's like I got these values and I have this random running back who no one else was taking at this time, who, if he goes off, is going to give me a huge edge, not just on later drafters, but the drafters who I'm drafting with currently. Like, it's just going to be a super unique team that you have with one of those guys.
I totally agree. Yeah, I have no pushback on that. I think what I mostly meant was just, if we set aside Chris Evans and we set aside the market is pushing this player up when it probably may not make sense, we set aside that situation. Inherently, it is understandable to say there's this kind of dusty veteran who's older. It's the beginning of the offseason. Yeah. I'll take my shot on the young guy stepping up, right? Sure. It's okay. I think that's okay, right? So if you did this, if you combine these two things, you would have found Eli Mitchell 2 years ago.
Sure.
If you combine these two things, you said Mostert, Jeff Wilson, I mean, Trey Sermon, like, I don't know, this Eli Mitchell dude was pretty good in college, and he wasn't like he wasn't a UDFA.
6th round pick, I think.
Yeah. So you're like, maybe and then you say, well, Pat said also, if I'm going to do that, maybe I take the undrafted guy. So you would be combined. So like, that would be like, you combine those things. But most of the time, this is where it really goes wrong with something like Chris Evans, in my opinion, is most of the time we can do that song and dance about the young guy. God knows I love to. I don't like the olds and all that kind of stuff. NFL, particularly at like backup running back, your bet is almost always going to hit on the veteran, not because he's better, not because that young back may never become something, but because NFL teams have this trust relationship with the running back position, because the running back position's job, particularly the backup, is to not fuck it up and not get your quarterback killed. They don't have you on the roster thinking you're the next Adrian Peterson. They have you on the roster because you're not going to screw stuff up. Yeah. And when the young guy comes in, most of the time he screws stuff up in pass pro, right? A, executing pass pro, B, knowing protections, right? Knowing option routes and different. A lot of these guys have never done this stuff. You know what I mean? Like we'll talk about some guys over the course of the summer. Probably, I know you like Dwayne McBride. Dwayne McBride has probably never done any of these things when he shows up to training camp that he's going to be asked to do. In high school, they just take the ball and run because they're the best player on the team, right? They probably play middle linebacker and running back. And on offense, what did it turn around and hand it to Dwayne because he's the best player in the state, you know? Yep. So we hand it to him, and then they go to college.
Especially true for Dwayne. Dwayne's not a pass catcher.
And so he goes to college, and guess what? This dude's really good at taking the ball and running with it, but he can't catch, and he's not very smart. You know, Dwayne could be really smart. I'm just saying a lot of times, right? You just hand him the ball. You show up to NFL camp, and they're like reading these absurd long, play names, and you got to know what to do. So anyway, I think that's where we failed with Chris Evans. Was we got a little out over our skis on hoping for the next young guy when really the actual most likely bet was P. Ryan all along. And then we did what you just outlined. Then we chased the guy up the board with everybody's drafting him. And there's just this P. Ryan guy sitting back in the last round getting drafted 5% of the time that we could have taken. That was an absolute, that wasn't even a single. We saw he was a fucking home run last year if you drafted him. So, go ahead.
That's one thing with my exposures that I want to be like, if I end up having a gross amount of, Tim Patrick, I've started mixing in Devontae Parker now post the contract sign, even though Hopkins might be there because we know he's not getting cut. That was a concern with the Hopkins thing too. It's like, well, Parker might get cut. So I've started mixing him in. Robert Woods. I don't really draft Marvin Jones. There's another gross veteran that I do draft though.
Well, take Josh Reynolds. Don't take Marvin Jones. At least Josh Reynolds has like a smidge of juice.
Yeah. Plus, like he's gonna definitely lose his role at the end of the season. So what's the point? Oh, the Giants guys. I take Slayton.
Yeah. Yep.
All
the Giants are there. All the Giants are back there.
Yeah. So you just you can get Paris Campbell though. He's kind of steamed up. But like I'll take
I've been taking a lot of 2-2.
I take 2-2-2. Yeah. So I like those gross veterans, right? I'm going to be overweight that group right now, in this part of the offseason. And I think that's one thing to consider with your exposures too, is like, it's okay to take stands that you're not even going to have on a summer-wide portfolio, right? Like, what are you doing in this part of the offseason? Like, one thing that I've decided this year is that I want to take this approach where, I'm playing to the early drafts like I laid out, where I don't necessarily want to go my 18th round pick. I'm swinging for the fences because I think I've been sort of convinced that, reading the Best Ball Manifesto, Mike Leone's article, like those dead roster spots really hurt, and we're more likely to get those dead roster spots this time of year. So, saying I'm going to take this guy is going to be a home run for me. He might be a strikeout, and those strikeouts really hurt. So I don't want to be like, a portfolio that's full of holes in these early drafts is kind of the way I'm thinking through it. Now, maybe that's just wrong. Maybe, and I'll be kind of curious how this plays out, because it might be the case that, in fact, that's just a fact of life when you draft in June, and that what you really should be doing is swinging for the fences and trying to get as many of those amazing teams as you can. And I'm going to have this like just weak portfolio of early teams that doesn't have enough. Although now I'm just arguing with myself, but I do. One thing I will say is
I do that. I think I do that every day.
Yeah. One thing I will say is that like a safe pick can be Josh Downs.
Correct.
Like Josh Downs in the 18th round is a safe pick in the way I'm thinking through things, because I'm trying to hit singles for the fantasy playoffs. So I'm guys who are going to make the roster, guys who look like they have a role right away. Rookies are going to come on at the end of the season. They're going to be more likely to be producing in the playoffs than earlier. So I'm not just like literally just taking only gross vets. I'm going to be strongly overweight veteran wide receivers who have some draft capital behind them, who I think have a role right away. Like that group, I also want to be like way overweight on, especially if they're starting to slide in drafts. Wasn't taking much Jalen Hyatt, starting to scoop up some Jalen Hyatt now. I'm heavy on
My
Marvin.
God, he fell, by the way. The Hyatt fall, I think it's gone too far. I agree he should have fallen. He was going way too high. He's going to be in the 200s soon. And I'm like,
I know.
Okay, that's
exciting.
That's a little aggressive.
And that's a pretty, it's a high upside, but also a safe pick if you think about.
Yeah, he's not getting cut.
He's not getting cut. And he, what does he have to do to have a role by week 15. Like maybe not that much. So those are the types of plays that I want to be overweight on this time of year. At the end of the season, I want to flip aggressively. And this is the thing I really want to focus on. I didn't do this nearly enough last year. Those P Ryans, those Justin Jacksons from 2 years ago. We get the word. This is the guy. This is the guy. He's definitely, or very likely the clear number 2. Jalen Warren was a guy last year, didn't really hit last year, even though we were correct in that he was the clear number 2, didn't do a ton for you. But that type of play, the Jalen Warren, the UDFA, who emerges as the running back 2, we have strong evidence that he is in fact the running back 2. Preseason usage backs it up. All the beat writers are saying this guy's locked in. That guy hasn't been drafted early on. And so, especially with a portfolio that sort of sat out those types of backfields, I'm going to be really aggressive and like chasing dudes up into the 13th round of not going to bother me, because I'm going to get leverage on all of these other drafters who, were drafting Benny Snell or, I'm talking about last year, not this year.
Yeah.
Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland, and I'm going to have all the Warren because they were just wrong about who the backup was.
Yeah, I love that. That's one of my favorite points that I think inherently we probably were like, yeah, we now know this guy. And he maybe even the same people that will dunk on you for tweeting about Robert Woods would dunk on us for tweeting something like this conversation that we're having. Like, yeah, dumbass, this is why you wait till August so that you can then get, those guys. But I do think there's a psychological effect, which I think we've a little bit talked about before, where you're like, especially if you drafted Chris Evans, to be like, shit, I just drafted 25 Chris Evans teams. And then you really want to get sick. You start doing the math. You're like, God damn it. How much money is that? Like now I just threw that in the toilet. And then admitting you're wrong, admitting those teams.
That's the part though. You don't do that. A lot of people don't do that, myself included, right? Your brain protects you from that. Your brain, like literally, that's like what biases are, right? They're like literally just defense mechanisms. Your brain's like, no, it's Evans. It's Evans, dude. Like you'll reject information that's P Ryan. You'll argue with people who tell you that it's P Ryan.
Yep.
I did this. Gretch was telling me like probably 2 weeks before I realized it was P Ryan, that it was P Ryan. And I was like, Gretch hasn't paying attention. It's Evans. He's not drafting enough baseball teams.
You haven't even drafted. Let me sit this one out.
Are you even drafting, bro? Yeah. And he was right. And I wouldn't listen because I didn't want to, admit that like I'd been drafting the wrong guy all summer. That's like, you're not going to be open-minded when you have a hard stance on a dude. And I just want to, it's not like that I'm going to be open-minded. I just want that, like that feeling that's going to kick in of like, no. This is wrong. This information is bad. I want to fight that as hard as humanly possible. We got this, by the way, you and I got this, and we both ignored it on Antonio Gibson 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
JD McKissick was playing the third down. We rationalized, it doesn't matter. It's the preseason. It doesn't matter. JD McKissick played all the third down snaps. It did matter. He was a third down back all season. It torched Gibson's upside. We're going to get information like that. Instead of fighting it, we should pivot hard to the opposite, because especially if the other guy hadn't been drafted, that's the biggest thing. It's like if the other guy hadn't been drafted, or
right, if it were Jonathan Williams at the time, if Jonathan Williams was out there on third downs and we were like, oh shit, this is crazy. Like now he's what Jalen Warren is right now to Najee Harris is what Jonathan Williams would have been, right? Like total 100% handcuff, and he's getting some passing down work. It was McKissick. So I think part of why that happened was because of a bias against McKissick.
Yeah.
And so we were just like, he can take that, which was total like arrogance and bias. But when it's someone that you can then see the upside in themselves, like Jalen Warren, it's easier to be like, okay, yeah, maybe it's just Warren, right? Instead of Najee, as opposed to Gibson versus McKissick. I think I definitely just anchored so hard, and I think McKissick was a part of that reason as well.
For sure, yeah, because in that case, the pivot was just to probably start fading Gibson unless his price dropped, which doesn't feel fun. Favorite guy, drafting a ton of this guy, and now I'm just going to stop taking him because of some third down preseason information. Like, get the fuck out of here. My theory is not based on preseason data. It's based on this, upside, with his
Legendary
pass
upside.
catching, legendary
Yeah,
upside, his college profile, efficiency, all this. But, if you did just do that, you would have ended up with a lot more Jonathan Taylor in 2021. Yep. If you just were like, at cost, I'm going to start taking Taylor a little bit more than Gibson. And if Gibson falls to the late second, in that case, you would have ended up with Gibson instead of CEH. So who cares? But at cost. So that's another thing I want to, because there's guys I have big stands on right now. Breece Hall would be a big example. I've got a massive stand on Breece Hall. Now, if we see that, Breece Hall, the reports start to get a lot more shaky about the ACL, certainly if they sign Dalvin Cook, then that would come with a big, but let's say like Izzy just starts getting talked up. Mm-hmm. And the reports on Hall are fine, but it's like he'll probably miss some time. I do think I just want to be able to like kind of check in with myself and be like, you made your bet with the information that you had at the time. But
yes.
Given this new information, as bad as it feels, maybe let's cool out. Maybe let's chill out a little bit on Breece Hall now. If that happens, it's going to be really difficult for me to actually do that. But I just want to do a better job of that, because it's one of those things that's definitely burned me in the past of just doubling down when I shouldn't double down. I'm willing to double down if the market hands me a double down opportunity. In fact, I want to do that.
Kyle Pitts falls it around in half only because the market, going back to our very kind of one of the original points conversations, solely because the market has said fuck tight ends. Has nothing to do with Kyle Pitts, nothing to do with news, nothing to do with his situation, nothing. It is the market has decided tight ends are less valuable. I don't know if that's right. We have evidence to believe the contrary, right? So I'm willing to just say they're wrong here. I'm going to bet against it. This is, like you said, this is Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissic. This is J.K. Dobbins last year, where we're like, maybe he'll be healthy. Maybe it doesn't seem great for Dobbins, particularly last year. Doesn't seem great, but maybe he'll be healthy. I'll buy him in the 5th, because this is a spot. I'm 0 RB. He's a great anchor running back if he's healthy on a 0 RB team. Well, we get to August or whatever, and the guy's dragging his leg around the practice field. It's probably a good time to be like, okay, those 5th round J.K. Dobbins teams are probably not great, and that's okay. That's okay. You were operating on a bet at the time, just like you're doing with Breece Hall. If we get to camp and Breece is healthy, you think you're going to love those 3rd round teams, because he's jumping Jacobs and he's jumping Ramondre and he's jumping Derrick Henry and whatever, because everybody's so excited about the Jets and this young player. If they're like, oh yeah, Breece is ready to roll 100% at week 1, he's going to be 2nd round pick. And so you're going to love your Breece stand, but to make it and win bets like that, you have to be willing to do what you just said. You have to be willing to say, I made the bet, it missed.
Right.
I got to back
What's
off
my
now.
edge today? This is best ball. You don't have to manage those teams. Okay, you drafted a guy, Breece Hall.
And they're not dead. It's not over.
They're not dead. Yeah.
He's not. He didn't. He didn't pull a Will Fuller. He's just not going to be great week 1. You can still win the tournament with Breece.
Right. Yeah, Breece is so tough in this example because like they either sign Dalvin Cook and he's like a 5th rounder, or they don't, and I think he'll creep up. But like, let's just say they don't, and but the injury stuff starts to look like shakier and shakier. Or he has it's like maybe I don't know, but let's just stick with the Breece one. But it's like those types of guys, if you end up feeling like a little shakier on the bet, just try to forget about the teams you've already drafted, because you don't have to manage them. It's best ball. They will manage themselves. You don't have to think about them again. If one bubbles up to the top, it will have nothing to do with your thoughts about it from the time you drafted it until the time it bubbles up and makes a final for you. So what is your edge when you're drafting today? And I think like if you think about it from the Gibson example, like the edge, as soon as you get that preseason information about McKissic as a Gibson bull, prior to that information, your edge can still be flipping to Taylor and maybe pivoting to Taylor hard and maybe saying, you know what, my overall portfolio, I'm going to make sure that is a bit even on. It's not even on these players right now. I'm going to make sure I'm in fact overweight Taylor. I did do this last year in one case, which was a difficult case for me to do it because it was on Ronald Jones. So I was drafting a ton of Ronald Jones early in like the 10th, 11th round. Because he's on the Chiefs, dude. He's gonna smash.
Yep.
And It was even before the Pacheco stuff really got off, but I was like, you know, I'm drafting this guy at the exclusion of other players who I like. And Rachaad White was a guy I was really excited about, you know, passing down specialist, you know, bigger, can kind of get used on early downs some as well. Doesn't just have to take third downs and all that Tom Brady dump offs galore. Really excited about that profile. Kind of didn't, it's sort of like one of those ones that didn't really hit or miss.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be very overweight White. I just thought you know, if it hits, it could hit really big. Fournette ended up staying healthy all year, so didn't quite get there. But I was like, I don't have nearly enough White. I don't even like this stand that I'm making, you know? And so I pivoted really hard away from Rojo and towards White and some other, it wasn't just White. There's some other running backs in that range that I liked. So I think if you find your portfolio not looking the way you want, it's fine, I think, to kind of to pivot hard and be aggressive going forward, especially if you're like, going forward, I think my edge is X, and I'm going to press that edge, even if that edge runs counter to something you thought yesterday.
That we could probably just put that on a YouTube short, you know, what is your edge right now? What is your edge today? Because it applies to like everything that we've really talked about here. And I mean, most things that you could talk about from a best ball strategy perspective. But think about the Bengals backfield thing in reference to the what is your edge today. The Bengals don't know who the backup running back is going to be. They're going to wait for training camp. Travion, because he's the veteran, this is how shit goes, right? At all levels of football. The incumbent veteran older person gets the first crack, right? If you ever played high school football, there's some sophomore who is a stud. He probably doesn't start week 1 at middle linebacker because you got a senior who's busted his ass for 4 years, right? And he gets the start. He may get benched in the first game. He may get benched by week 3 or whatever. The talent may rise to the top. But the young talent has to prove itself to usurp the older veteran. Chris Evans couldn't do that with Samaje Perine. He couldn't come close, quite frankly. Maybe Chase Brown will do that with Travion Williams. Travion Williams is probably not as good as Samaje Perine. Travion Williams may not be an NFL running back. But Chase Brown's going to have to prove it. So I don't know how you can come in and say, Chase Brown is my edge right now. It doesn't mean never draft Chase Brown. If, you know, times where his profile might make sense at the end of a draft. I don't know. You need some home run swing at running back. You think he's a better home run swing than Travion or other late running backs, whatever. I don't even really care to argue that because that's its own long conversation. But I don't know how anyone can say, what is your edge today? It's Chase Brown, right? No, it's not.
Because if you had really strong conviction that Mixon was going to get cut, maybe.
Yeah. But like, that's just your gut strong conviction. There is, in my opinion, no true evidence to say, like, is it possible? Absolutely. And if you wanted to say, be like, there's right, let's run the math. X% that Mixon gets cut, X% that Mixon, you know, gets hurt because he's old, X% that Mixon is stone dust, which he might be. And then X% that Travion and Williams and Evans are terrible, which they probably are. So, right, he makes this, but like, even then, you're like, is that your biggest edge right now?
Edge? Yeah.
You know, I certainly don't think so. I have mine. Me and you both have things that we think are our biggest edge from a player perspective, and they're different. But one that I love is generally more. God, every time someone calls me at this time, but apparently between 10 and 11 a.m. Central Time is the spammer bots phone call times. But but I think when people talk about like structural things, they talk about it in like the old let the draft fall to you type of a situation where the draft gave me CMC and Bijan to start, which, I mean, that would be fun. But like, now I'm going to build a good structure around that, which is totally fine. But I also think there are structural edges at any given point during the course of the offseason that don't relate to like, how is this draft going for you? Right.
For sure. Yeah.
This time of year might be better for, I'm not saying it is. This time of year might be better for zero running back. This time of year might be better for a robust running back. This time of year might be better for elite quarterback. I actually think this time of year is worse for elite quarterback. As an example, I'm hammering lots of those mid to late. So I'll just pull it up because I can use it to.
Although according to Spike Week, I'm very heavy on elite quarterback, which doesn't feel right to me. Maybe it's the definition.
We moved it.
You take a lot of Fields and stuff.
Yeah, so Fields, it's through Herbert or Lawrence. We tweaked it a little bit this year because we're trying to get a certain bucket of those quarterback. It's going to be a little bit different each year, basically, is what I'm saying in terms of the elite quarterback. It's either through Herbert or Lawrence is counting your elite quarterback. So you see, mine is a little bit higher too. So this is all my tournaments, including the Superflex, Best Ball Mania, right? Puppies, poodles, everything. There's 204 teams in here.
Is it not through Richardson? Because that might be why.
It could be. I don't know.
Through Richardson, that would explain.
I should know it off the top of my head, but it's been a long time since we redefined it. So I will come up with that answer. But so you kind of see, I'm basically like splitting the middle between elite quarterback and late round quarterback, 37% versus 27%. Close enough. Elite tight end, however, despite the fact that I wrote an article, I did a video on this fun new strategy that I do really like, that's kind of combining a late round quarterback and late round tight end. I actually think the biggest edge is what you said with elite tight ends. Not any one of them in particular. Like you go to my players over here and see like total player exposure. You're obviously not, you're seeing Sam Howell and Damian Harris and really I would say that maybe these four, if we include Rashad Bateman, are my players that I think specifically are my edge right now. Beyond them, the guys who have high exposure are just like the guys who happen to be there in my drafts. It's not really intentional or planned, but you notice there's not an elite tight end that shows up. I'll keep scrolling. Andrews. I have 20% Mark Andrews. So he's the first elite tight end that you get to. But like my biggest player take stand is Damian Harris. But elite tight end as a strategy is in my opinion, my biggest edge. And it actually isn't very much Travis Kelce. It's Andrews, Pitts, Kittle, Hawkinson, right? Waller, Goddard, or whatever. Like I'm
light on Hawk because he goes first among those groups, that group. But
I actually don't know how much Hawk. So I have 7% Hawk. So not anything crazy. It's definitely Pitts at 18, Andrews at 20, and then Kittle's probably similar. Kittle at 8. So I didn't even know that. I'm learning this a lot. So
Pitts is 18. Andrews at 13. I'm actually like Kelce, as we talked about. I'm 9 overall, but this is one of the things that jumps out. Like I'm 9% Kelce, but I haven't drafted him in BBM at all.
Oh, really?
Had no idea. But that's because I'm not avoiding him. I'm slightly overweight the field on Kelce, which just so happens that on 45 BBM teams, I haven't taken him. So that's like one thing. I think balancing stuff out on the tournaments to some degree, like just knowing like I don't have any Kelce BBM shares. That's weird. As a player I'm not fading, it just happens to have fallen that way. Now I've gotten a lot of 101. I have 20% Justin Jefferson in BBM.
I have 4%. You just made me curious to go look at my BBMs. I have 4% Jefferson, and I've drafted 2 Travis Kelce teams out of 45 BBM.
Yeah, I don't have any.
Look at this. There's my.
There you go. Okay, so you're getting the 102.
I'm getting the 102 all the time.
I have 7% Jamar Chase. So
and Cup. Yeah, Cup and Chase are my.
I'm big Cup
and Chase.
16% Cup. I'm taking Cup a lot. But anyway, yeah, I think that's one thing you can kind of dive into as well that I like doing. And yeah, it's like sometimes you find stuff where you're like, why? How can that even be? Like I'm not fading Kelce like that, but
that's so interesting. So I am going to pull up so when I go to Travis Kelce, this is what I love to start really digging into is what you just said. And I think it's hard and I think it's time consuming and you can't cover every single base of like every nook and cranny of your portfolio. But that's also why we give you this tool so that you can do some. How do you find out I don't have any Travis Kelce in BBM, right? Well, you just are kind of playing around. You're like, well, I got 55% elite tight end. Go ahead.
The way I found is I went to the drafts tab.
And you just Yeah,
not exposure, but drafts. And I just scrolled down because I like how you guys have this. It shows that your average ADP, that's one thing I was looking at across all my tournaments. I was like, a lot of green here. I'm getting good prices. Jonathan Taylor, I've reached on. Adams, I've reached on. Chase, I've gotten just at ADP. I've never gotten a value on him. But
same.
Outside of the, let's see, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, I've reached on because I took some of them when they were in the second. But outside of those 5 players, oh no, AJ Brown I've reached on too. So 6 players in the top 24, the only players who I haven't been getting on average with an ADP discount. So, overall, I like seeing that.
You can see I'm reaching on Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is one of my favorite second-round picks. So this is another thing. I'm identifying some guys I prefer a little bit more in the second round, or not even necessarily prefer a little bit more. It's reasonably flat. I don't draft a ton of Devontae. I haven't drafted a ton of Eckler. Outside of those guys, right, it's just kind of whatever the room is kind of giving me. But I am, so like with Chubb, I'm mixing and matching a little bit. I'll take Chubb at the 109 and then try to get him with JT or something like that, because their ADPs are literally right next to each other. And I don't personally see that big of a difference between those guys and kind of everybody that goes in that range. So that runs me into this. But like you said, you can see some of these things start to pop out when you're like, bad value on Chubb. I wonder what those Chubb teams, why is that, right? Then you can go over to your lineups and literally see the physical lineups, or you can go over to exposure and type in Nick Chubb and see, what do my Nick Chubb teams look like? But I'll find myself just kind of like you said, like just browsing. Right. I'm just like, it's like I got a new magazine. I don't really give a shit. Right. I got East Bay. Like, I'm not actually going to buy anything from this East Bay, but like they got tons of cool shit in here, all these basketball shoes and all these clothes and stuff like that. God, I'm never going to.
At the top, you can change which tournament you're browsing.
Exactly.
So you can do all, right. You can do Best Ball Mania. Yeah.
And we're adding in weekly winners. There's a lot of changes that weekly winners, for anyone that didn't see a new contest on Underdog, that's a completely different format. So lots of all this kind of stuff has to change. But I did want to add, we talked kind of about this already, but sort of, I'd laugh every time I say like to wrap up or to close now, because we had the one episode where I got made fun of relentlessly for saying it about 7 times and continuing to talk for 2 hours. But is there anything right now that you think you are way underweight on, that you want to? We talked about like elite tight end, you're going to keep hammering, right? But is there anything that maybe you haven't been doing, or something you've discovered in terms of your exposure that you're trying to change, right? Just what's something on either end of the spectrum? I'm going to keep hammering it. I'm going to back off, right? I'm going to back off this thing I've been doing now, or I want to recover, right? Like Travis Kelce, you're like, I don't have any BBM teams of Travis Kelce. That's not the plan. And just kind of anything of those that jump out to you.
Yeah, there's some like stands that I didn't really like intend to make, that I'm finding that I have been making. Like I'm pretty light CeeDee Lamb, especially in Best Ball Mania. Didn't realize that. And so, I don't love CeeDee Lamb this year at cost, and just, Dallas is going to run probably a lot fewer plays, and there's more target competition. I'm not sure Lamb's like truly an elite wide receiver. He's very good, but so I don't have the biggest, the most optimism for Lamb, but I don't want to be like taking a huge stand against him. So to me, like I'm 45 drafts in Best Ball Mania. It's sort of time for me to just like go through and see, like, I don't have much Nick Chubb actually. That's one where I tend to break the tie to Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor was the 101 or 102 last year. Mm-hmm. And as much as we've liked Nick Chubb for a long time, and as good as he is at running the ball, he's never been drafted like that. We've never thought that Nick Chubb could actually deliver a legendary season. Jonathan Taylor basically has. In 2021, he through the first 17 weeks, hit that mark in PPR. And so I do want to be overweight Taylor, but it's like one of those things where I'm like, I'm doing this. The market doesn't seem to be cooperating here. They keep handing me Taylor and taking Chubb. I'm probably going to have to mix in some Chubb, because to me, personally, like Taylor over Chubb is an easy click. But I do see that Chubb isn't like he's not Ronald Jones in the passing game, right? Like if you just he's more like
I think he's solid. Like he's
solid.
He's not Christian McCaffrey, but
it's kind of like JT, fine. Really. Yeah. Like
they can do it, and then once it's one of those things. They're not gonna run CMC routes or whatever.
No,
but they're capable. Right, they're capable, and they actually can catch the ball. And then the real power is once that ball is in their hand, those two dudes' hands in the open field. That is corners tackling JT and Nick Chubb in the open field. Like, no, that's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah, and like Chubb is, I believe, 27 years old, and Jonathan Taylor is 24 years old. And so, if you're looking at a guy with sort of similar. Somewhat similar profiles, very similar draft costs. Yeah, Chubb turns 28 in December, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just have like less confidence in Chubb doing it, but it's going to be binary. Chubb's either going to be Chubb or he won't. And so I don't want to be out. So right now it's like trying to dial in stuff. I got to go pick up a package. I'll be right back.
Yep. And I totally agree with all that. I found that it's funny because I recently just found what Pat was talking about, but was the opposite for me because I am really big on Chubb, but I'm also really big on JT. And it was that weird thing where I was just when I was thinking about doing something different, like I mentioned, I'm just going to pull Chubb up to the 110 and see if I can get him with Saquon or even at a once upon a time Eckler or Bijan or JT or Pollard or whatever. When I was doing that, I was always doing it with Chubb, even though I should have been doing it with both Chubb and JT because I like them both a ton. I think they're side by side in my rankings. So that has led to 16% Chubb for me. And this is just in BBM now. And then what did I say? 9%? 9% JT. And so if it were up to me and I were setting a perfect portfolio, I would say I think I probably have about the same of both of these, maybe slightly one of the other. Maybe I kind of want to get both of them on the same team. Like, they go right next to each other in ADP. So they're like never on the same team. So I want to try to force that. But I've found so far through this draft, I've skewed towards Chubb, and that even though I really like Chubb, that wasn't my intent. It wasn't my intent when I set out to do this. It's really, I like both of these guys. I want to have both of them.
Yeah, like best ball drafts are fun, right? So I'm not like, I tend to draft more from my phone than my desktop, and that's gonna be a little bit more vibes based in my approach.
Yep.
I'm breaking ties this way. I have these players like pretty even. These are two random players, these two hypothetical players. I lean 60-40 towards player A. Let me go check my exposures. I'm 90-10.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen all the time. And I don't know, maybe you would find yourself better at dealing with this. I think we'll all probably have our strengths and weaknesses in various drafting things. And one of my weaknesses, I would say, is not having a great intuitive feel for where I actually am in terms of my exposures, because I tend to break ties harder to the guy I like than I would if you just sat me down and said, we're gonna like auto draft your whole portfolio, but you get to tell us, and all be structured. So you just pencil in the percentage that you want of each guy, and then we'll send you back some teams, right? My actual portfolio, it's a struggle to get it to look like what that would look like, because I just tend to be more overweight the guys I like. I tend to, when I'm in the draft, I tend to be like, I like this team, so I don't want to ruin it with the wrong guy. So I'm going to take the wrong guy.
That's the hardest part, is that I think we all know that managing your portfolio is incredibly important. Some could make the case all the shit is important. Some could make the case it may be the most important part of all of this is like, right? Think about it from a DFS perspective. I know this is not, it's not perfect apples to apples, but when you go into a DFS slate on a Sunday morning, right? You're playing 150 teams into the Millie Maker on DraftKings, and what matters is your set of 150 lineups. Of course, they need to be made up with 150, theoretically plus EV. lineups make up that 150. So it goes from a lineup up to your portfolio, but there's a portfolio approach to the lineups. You want to play your 150 best lineups, but the best lineups are determined by the, expected value of each lineup in its singularly. So like, you're not just going to have, everybody has different approaches, but you're not just going to have 100% of this guy, 98% of this guy, right? 95% of this guy, whatever.
Right.
You're going to have a bunch of different teams. So every week is different, but generally speaking, you're going to have a bunch of different players, a bunch of different teams, a player pool, etc. But like when we draft best ball teams, like you said, you get on the clock. There's not a tool that says, here's my portfolio, which maybe we'll build one. Here's my portfolio. This should be my recommended pick based on what I think my portfolio should look like and what my portfolio looks like right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, what is my edge right now? This would be, what is the best pick right now? Well, you have less JT than Chubb, so fucking take JT in this draft, because that was your intention, was not to have more Chubb than JT. But it's hard when you get on the clock, right? Even we have our draft hacker overlays, right? Which again, as you mentioned, they don't work on the phone. But if I'm sitting there drafting with them, I still sometimes, like you said, I got Lamar and Andrews and Tyreek, and I got these crazy values in between there. And then it comes to Rashad Bateman. And like, I think I don't have him up here anymore, but you see my Rashad Bateman exposure is 38%. He's my highest owned wide receiver. He's one of my highest owned players. I love him. Like, I'm obsessed with Rashad Bateman, but that wasn't necessarily my plan. And my plan wasn't necessarily to take him, trying to pull up Zay Flowers to take him 4 times more than Zay Flowers. Right. And so I'm not saying that's right, wrong, or indifferent, but it wasn't necessarily my plan. It's just happening because every time I get on the clock, I'm like, Bateman's the best pick. Bateman's the best pick. Bateman's the best pick.
It's gotta be Bateman. Yeah.
And I just keep taking him. So
let me share a tip that I think can help a little bit with this. I have 7% Flowers, and this is just Best Ball Mania, which is going to be a little noisier right now. I have 7% Flowers and Bateman in Best Ball Mania, but Bateman, I know I'm pretty high on it. But yeah, I have 18% across all my tournaments, and Flowers, I'm at 5%. So I am, but only about 3. So here's how I get myself to draft Flowers. Take them together. If there's situations where you can get both players stacked with Lamar, take them together. The reason I say that is I think there really is a psychological thing where once you've drafted a player like 3 times, you're willing to draft that player. If you've never drafted a player, you don't even see their name. You're literally scanning who's available, and you're like, no one's here. Because I don't draft these players. But if there's a dude who you're at least taking, sometimes then they start to become a viable selection for you. And so if I'm sitting down, I'm saying, I really ought to have more, say, Flowers, then just figuring out a way of, okay, you know what? I'm going to double up on Bateman and Flowers at the 7-8 turn with Lamar. And, I don't have Andrews on that team. So it's actually a legit way to build. And, you do a couple of those, and all of a sudden when Zay Flowers comes back around in the 8th round and you've got Tua, you're like, oh, sweet. This is a perfect bring back, and maybe Bateman was there. But you're like, but I want to get a little more Zay Flowers. I already made that decision. So now am I actually doing that, or am I taking Bateman? I'm probably taking Bateman. It's going to be hard to pass. I know. But at the very least, maybe you identify Bateman's gone, but I'm going to come in and get that cheap Zay Flowers because he kind of, sometimes I'll see stuff. I'm doing these puppy slows, and I'll see stuff where I'm like, oh, I should have taken this guy, after I already picked. And it's because that player, he just doesn't register as quickly as when I see the other name, the guys that I am drafting more frequently that I feel good about. It's just, they literally don't hit my brain as quickly as the players I like.
I agree. That is, you said, I think that's an everyone issue. Everyone can even say, you can be a non-football watcher. You can be Brian Hooper or whatever, who doesn't really care about football, right? Doesn't even know some of the players or whatever. But when you do this repetitively over and over and over and over again, names register more to you. Maybe you talk to other people and they like X player or whatever. It is just an inherent fact that information is going to seep into your brain. Whether it's your personal, right? Like these are generally my personal opinions on a handful of players. And we all have opinions on really most of the player pool, but I am okay. I've gotten better at separating myself from the middle. I have the guys I love. There's like really, I would call it really 4 players right now that I love. I got this filtered down for Bateman and Zay, but it should be close enough. So Damian Harris, Rashad Bateman, Rashad Penny, and then Sam Howell, which I've made my love known for way too much. But those 4 guys are the guys that when I default to a late round quarterback, I really like Howell the most. Rashad Bateman is this kind of huge tier drop off at wide receiver. And I also just really, really like him this year, given the Ravens and Lamar. And then these 2 kind of like 0 RB-ish running backs are like the guys, my flag plants, if you will. Beyond them, there are guys I have more exposure to and less exposure to, but that's generally just like not planned. But then I also have guys that I'm like, nope, not taking them. I'm not doing it. I'm not taking Adam Thielen. I don't really want to take Miles Sanders. I don't want to take Najee Harris. Guys like that. I don't know. We don't need to get into the specifics, but I have this plan, and the guys in the middle I can do okay with. Like, I don't really love Michael Pittman, but he's fallen now, and it's like, yeah, I'll take him when it makes sense, or I'll mix him in. I can get past that block. But when I get to Thielen, like there is no chance that I will take him. And so making sure that I'm not taking guys that should be in the middle and turning them into guys that are Thielen is something that I think is my biggest struggle, because it happens without you knowing it, right? It happens I just keep taking whatever. I just keep taking Kyle Pitts. He keeps falling to the 70s. I'm just going to keep taking Kyle Pitts. And the next thing you know, you have 0 George Pickens. And it's not that you love George Pickens, but you had no intention of getting 0 George Pickens.
Right.
It just happened by happenstance. And so that, to me, is like the exposure exercise that is hardest. And maybe you don't care. Maybe you just say, I'm just going to vibe space draft and let my chips fall where they may. But for me, that's not how I want to approach it, and I don't think that's how you should approach it.
I do want a vibe-based draft, but I want to check in and see what my vibes have been totaling up to. Like, what have your vibes been creating for you that maybe you're like, you know what, I'm just going to keep it in the back of my mind. Keep in the back of my mind, Pickens is someone I need a little bit more of because I haven't been taking him or whatever. And yeah, I completely agree with that idea of, if I'm going to fade someone, I'm comfortable like fading them really hard. I faded Joe Mixon really hard last year. Yeah, arguably that was stupid because he certainly showed that he had the single week upside.
Fucking painful.
Yeah.
That sucked.
Yeah. So I'm not all like my fades are gonna be good, right? But like I generally am willing to take hard stances for and against players. But what you want to be able to do is capture when your edge hits, right? This is something Mike Leone and I have talked about when we were doing Establish the Edge, like understanding kind of what your edge is and then sort of pressing that edge. So if you really feel strongly that your edge is, a 5th round quarterback who's going to get benched once Ron Rivera gets fired, you at least want to be able to capture that edge if, that 1% outcome plays out. You don't want to be muddling that edge up by taking a bunch of other stands that you don't really even believe in. Like that's right. Like if you have, let's say your biggest stand is a second-year running back who's coming off a horrific knee injury, whose team's about to sign Dalvin Cook, if that, foolhardy stand actually succeeds, then you want to be able to make the most of it and have him paired with a variety of other solid play. Like if I have a ton of Breece Hall and then it's like, oh, but I only had Breece Hall paired with, like Calvin Ridley teams, or like I'm even though I have a ton of Breece Hall, I'm somehow really underweight Breece Hall with 3 other wide receivers who I liked, and one of which was the guy you needed to have this year. That would suck. And I don't want to, I'm okay saying Robert Woods is the guy. Cooper Kupp stinks, right? And being wrong. That's going to hurt. Luckily, I didn't do that, but that type of thing might haunt you forever. But
you would be, you're okay to be wrong when you believe a stand like that. And I think that's good.
What I hate, right? What I never want to do, and it probably will happen, but I want to fight this as hard as I can, is I didn't really have a strong take, but I ended up with 66% Woods and 33% Kupp just by chance. Kupp went a little ahead, and so I just ended up with Woods. I never really made the effort to even it out, and so I just was really light the league winner because I kind of didn't think about it very much. That's what I want to avoid.
And it's two things to me. One is the idea of when we talk about vibes, right? What vibes really is kind of putting your drafting skill to the test. You're saying, I'm good at this. I'm a skillful drafter. So I'm sitting on my couch on the phone instead of in the lab, right, with all of my resources up around me, because I don't need them, because I'm good at doing this, and time, life, whatever. But I can get in there, crank out a really good team, because I'm going to be able to adapt to this fast draft room or whatever. But you always do still need to make sure that what you just outlined is not happening solely because if you're drafting the best team and I would almost guarantee it is for nearly everyone, unless they're using something that can help them even it out, which of course we offer at Spike Week, or if you want to do it yourself, whatever. I pity the people that log all their teams in a spreadsheet, by the way. That sounds terrible, but you're going to almost assuredly run into that, and you probably can't cover every single one of the those things that you want to mitigate that Woods Kupp situation, or the Pitts Pickens, like I was just mentioning. But you ultimately, you can flex your skill around what you just said. If you believe Breece Hall or Sam Howell or whatever, I can go in and see what say using our draft IQ tool. I can go in and look, okay, I think these are my edges, my 3 edges: Breece Hall, elite tight end, and whatever. Let's make sure that around my edges, I'm not falling into a bunch of landmines to fuck up those edges.
Yeah.
Right. Because I have to admit, everyone has to admit, and I also think this is a huge flaw of fantasy football people in general, best ball drafters, whatever. You may have edges. If you're good at this, if you're skillful, if you're smart, whatever, you have edges. You don't have an edge on everything. No one does.
You don't.
There's not a person. You cannot possibly know all of these, right? From a player take perspective, you cannot possibly know enough about all of these. I don't care what kind of coder or modeler or analytics or how much time you spend. You can't possibly know enough about every single one of these players, everyone, the teams, their situation, the depth charts, the coaches. You can't. And then you can't possibly know enough about, right, the game theory elements and what your opponents are doing and how to structure teams and stacking and correlation. You can't possibly know enough about everything. So flex your muscles on the edges that you do have. You don't have an edge on every player. Stop drafting like you have an edge on every player. Draft like you have an edge on the couple players that you believe. Pat has an edge on Breece Hall. I tend to agree with him. Yeah, right. But that's we have to draw a line somewhere. You say, I think Breece Hall is an edge. So let's draft like Breece Hall is an edge. If Breece Hall is an edge, that doesn't mean that Robert Woods over Cooper Kupp is an edge, right? You wouldn't do that. You would want him to be split down the middle, because Breece is the edge, not the decision between those two. Exactly. Breece is the edge, not Chase Brown versus Travion Williams, right? Breece is the edge, not Sam Howell versus Jacoby Brissett. So operate as though Breece is the edge. For me, but we God damn it. I shouldn't have fucking buried myself with that one. But that's but everyone screws that up. God knows I do, but that's why we built some of these tools and we're having this conversation, because it is so important. And I think those are probably the biggest landmines that people fall into, because it's fun to draft on the Underdog app. It's fun to draft. Best ball's fun. You sit on your couch, or you sit on the shitter, or you sit on the front porch with a beer, and you're just drafting away. And then the next thing you know, you drafted 20 teams, and every time you took Bateman over Zay Flowers. and you like Bateman better, but not one.
You like him 20 times as much?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Probably not. So anyway, that's
sometimes this is like a next level tool. I don't know if you guys get into quantum computing, maybe you can go.
We got some smart people coming in, so
maybe I've sometimes wanted a tool that would help me essentially like simulate out the season based on my percentages of, you know, what I think is likely to happen in kind of key situations. Like, let's say I like Bateman, like I like Bateman 2.5 times as much as Zay Flowers. Okay. And I like JT twice as much as Chubb. But this is a season now. This tool does its work. This is a season where Chubb's the right answer. Chubb's the right answer. The other thing maybe you could do with this is like, I think that there's, you know, a 10% chance that, you know, the Packers are a really good offense this year. Right. And so it's just like, nope, this year, the Packers suck. So don't take Packers. You know what I mean? Like, and at least in any given draft now,
Jordan Love is Kyle Trask or whatever.
Jordan Love is a horrendous pick in this version of the world. Now, you'd have to kind of balance that. The reason that this tool would be sort of difficult to even use, much less build, is that maybe Packers are just falling to you, and you know, you're like, well, I know that I think there's a 10% chance, so I'm going to just scoop the Packers or whatever. But there's often times where you're like not sure where to go. You know, you're like, what? There's decision points here. These guys are about equal. It would just be in some ways to like, and maybe just kind of thinking through this as you try to balance your exposures. Like, I think there is some chance that this offense is going to be really good. So I want to have at least some exposure to that offense and play things out as I'm drafting. Like occasionally, like, you know, I think that the Packers are gonna crush this year. So I'm gonna build a team that represents what the Packers crushing looks like, and just sprinkle in a few of those teams, or it doesn't have to be the Packers, obviously, whoever, and just like make sure that, like, sometimes drafting with the idea of like strong stances, but then having those stances jumble around over the course of all your drafts. Because I think the issue that I have is like, I'll be like, you know, I'll have a strong stance, but then I'm drafting like all the time.
Yes.
Like that stance is going to have like all the time.
Every team is around one stance. And to the
binary,
edge, and
yes or no,
you're making it binary, and then the downstream effects to your exposure and your portfolio by operating in that binary fashion around one or two offenses.
Right. I don't even believe it's truly binary.
Right. This 100% is happening to me right now, and I'm part of why I'm comfortable with this is that we have the rest of this offseason to adjust. If this were August, this might be a very different situation, but still, point stands that like I am operating around the fact that Washington is very undervalued. And so we're doing it in different ways, but the same thesis. Now Washington is very undervalued, and they're going to be good, right? But what happens when you operate entirely around that thesis is that you don't get as much Desmond Ridder because your Washington projects better than Atlanta, right? And so, but you love all of the Atlanta pieces. It's just I'm running into more Washington stacks or more Washington exposure and also it's a little easier to get Washington than it is to get Atlanta, but besides the point, way too much Tyler Algier. I have tried to correct this, but it's leading to just like all Kyle Pitts and Tyler Algier and not as much Bijan and Drake London and not much Ridder at all, right? But like that, when I play out my portfolio, and if it were to continue like this and I get to week 1, Thursday Night Football, you know, I have very, very, very few Atlanta stacks and a bunch of Washington stacks. And like, I want more Washington, but this current like binary way I'm operating is leading me to really, really heavy one way and nothing the other way, right? The Packers, I can see the upside case of the Packers, but I don't draft a lot of Packer stacks because I'm personally drafting Howell and Purdy. Those are the two guys I'm trying to utilize that go late. And it's like, well, Pickett's the same thing to me as them, generally speaking. So I'm just going to take those other guys. But like, I don't want to have 0 Steelers stacks, right? And so all of this is very, very difficult to navigate. But as long as I think as long as you can acknowledge these things, that they exist, maybe you will or won't, right? When you get on the clock, you just say, fuck it, I'm going to take this guy. But the only way to know what your correct path forward is by figuring out where these gaps might exist and what you think kind of your portfolio should look like in your exposures.
Yeah. What's your portfolio saying? Like, is there absolutely no chance that this team is good, And I just think like that to me, like the whole point of looking at these is just to like, what is your portfolio saying versus what you think? Because they're not going to just naturally add up unless you're just like a full-on robot, right? Like you're not going to be able to do it.
That would be impressive. If you could actually be like, I want, that would be insane.
I wouldn't be impressed. I'd be like, dude, that's like, someone's just like, I don't have to review my exposures. I just know them.
Go outside, please.
Oh God, dude. I might like rethink my career if I met someone like that. Oof. I strongly prefer that you need to review your exposures.
There's one person watching this that is like, these motherfuckers. I know ask me my Jacoby Myers exposure. Just ask me. I know it. 4.
Some people have that thing. Yeah. Some people like I listen to Smartlist, and Will Arnett can just rattle off dates of things. Like is like, oh, that was February 2007. They're like,
that's mind blowing to me. Yeah, that's absolutely mind blowing.
If you're just that type of person, I'm sorry. I don't mean to come at you so hard, but listen, that's just so foreign to what I would be able to do that it actually does seem, crazy to me. But I just think like checking in with what you actually want to do, like there's 2 elements of it. Checking in does this portfolio match what I have been trying to do so far? And then does it match what I now think my edges are?
Right. And does it match what there's so much that goes into it, and we will come back later this summer and dive some more back into this. Particularly, it'll be not more fun, but it'll be interesting to look back on, like maybe once training camp has passed, right? We're in the preseason and we're in the final home stretch of best ball drafting. Now let's talk about what our exposures look like. How do they look different than what they look like right now on June 30th? But at the end of the day, the exposure thing is so difficult because it is everything that you just outlined in that, and that we've kind of talked about for an hour. What is your edge today, right? We talked about that earlier because it's going to be different later. It was different in May. It's different. It's constantly moving. And so you should, of course, attack that edge. But you also have this macro level idea of what you think your portfolio of teams should look like. It also may look different for each tournament. What you drafted into the Poodle is going to be different than what you draft into Best Ball Mania. And it's borderline impossible for any one human to really, with a job and like a life and a family and stuff, to manage this to the level of detail that you want. But it is important to like keep all those things in mind. You're not going to be perfect, but like just to keep these things in mind. That's like, yeah, like I just showed you, I have 4 times as much Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers in Best Ball Mania or whatever. It's unintentional. It wasn't intentional. Do I like Bateman more? Yes. But would I like to smooth those things out? Yes. Can I do that effectively for every situation in the draft? No, but I want to be cognizant of where my gaps could be and make sure that when I flip over the cards in week 1, I'm not like, God damn it, I like this team, or I liked the upside case for the Packers. I liked the upside case for the Falcons, but I have none. That was not I don't want to get to that point and we're doing a show in week 1 and being like, shit, I hate my teams. I don't want to get there. So I just want to keep tabs on it over the course of the summer.
Yeah, and I'm going to balance my overall portfolio to some extent, but I'm also going to try to balance my Best Ball Mania portfolio. Mm-hmm. If I do I don't know what they're going to offer in terms of other big tournaments, but, certainly if there's other like tournaments I really care about, I'm going to try to balance and they're big enough to where like if it's a 12 max or whatever, I don't think I really care about that. But, there are certain segments that I'm going to try to balance, but for the most part, I'm not going to like die. I'm not going to like, oh, in the puppy, I'm overweight. Like, who cares? They're sort of like the premier tournaments that I want to make sure I'm nice and even on.
Yep.
And then my overall portfolio. So this is, I'll tell you right now, it's a bit of a trick question. How much Sam Howell do you think I have in Best Ball Mania?
Ooh, okay. So it's a trick question. I know from talking to you or listening to you talk that it's not that you're completely out on him and he has a place on certain teams. So it's not 0, but it's certainly not going to be what did you say? Just like total Best Ball Mania, or does it matter?
My percentage exposure in Best Ball Mania.
In Best Ball Mania, 4%.
7%.
Oh my God, you're at the field. I never want to fucking hear you talk about Jacoby Brissett and Sam.
Well, here's why it's a trick question.
You're matching.
I've drafted him on those 3 teams, and it looks like one other $10 team. I don't even know what is $10. Is that the Golden or something? So I've
yeah, I think so.
So I'm 2% in my overall portfolio, but it just so happens I'm 7% in Best Ball Mania. Average ADP 207. So give them to me for free, and I'll take them.
That's nice. I also think he is more fitting in Best Ball Mania, where so freaking top heavy and there's not a lot of true home runs. I do like Purdy a lot, but like there's not really a major home run swing. And it's like, look, even if I advance out of my 12 team league, I just get my money back in Best Ball Mania. So like, let's just take the home run. If I lose this all, it's fine. I can take a more cautious approach in the Poodle 2 or the Puppy 12 or whatever that's gonna happen. Although they did release this weekly winners, which is certainly not helping me take a more cautious approach, because if you want to talk about swinging for the fences, this tournament is literally
hell.
This tournament is,
I mean, I'd be overweight Howell there for sure.
100%. I just drafted 2 solo Howell teams last night. 1-7-9-1 or something like that. Solo Howell with all just the absolute loaded everywhere else, and tons of running. But this format is fun. We don't need to get into weekly winners today. Maybe we'll cover it in the future. I did post an article on the website of some early weekly winners thoughts, but I do have to jolt. And I think we'll be taking next week off, as Pat is out of town. Plus, the first half of the week is all holidays and stuff like that. But we'll be back shortly. But Pat, what do you got going on here for the people for the next little bit?
Yeah, Legendary Upside. I've had a couple articles out this week on running back success rate, looking at NFL Next Gen's metrics there, and dove into the guys. Basically, every running back who had over 200 carries last year. So we have a big sample within that metric to look at, and just kind of talked through their outlook through the lens of that metric, but also just kind of digging into their receiving profile as well, which that has nothing to do with, and just kind of where I kind of stand on most of these running backs. So you can check those out. If you are just want to sign up for free, a big portion of both articles are free. So I would recommend just going up, signing up. I do that like with basically every article, and then I also have some free articles. I had one called Dictating the Turns on a tactic I'm using in Best Ball right now, which is completely free. So we'd recommend signing up, even if you don't want to do the premium membership right now. But if you do, you can do that at legendaryupside.com/early. Get $30 off your first year. So for $69, you get your first year. And that gives you access to the 40% off Spike Week. I also do still have some underdog credits. You can get a $50 underdog credit by filling out a form on the site. It's at the top of the site under perks/Discord. Go there, go fill out the underdog form. Gives me your username. I'll send that over to underdog and get a $50 credit. So I've said this before, but it is, I think, true. It is financially irresponsible not to sign up for Legendary Upside if you're going to be reviewing your exposures and playing on underdog.
I totally agree. And if you are reviewing your exposures or trying to do some of the things we talked about here that are very hard to do in drafts, our draft hacker overlays are kind of developed to help mitigate some of this stuff. You can see your exposures in real time. You can see your player, combinatorial exposures, right? If you took Lamar, when you get to the 7th round, how much of the players do you have centered around Lamar, right? Okay, you would be able to very quickly see some of those combinations. Oh, I only have one team with JT and Calvin Ridley. Maybe I'll take him over Debo here, right? There's just so many different things that you can do with it. It's all customizable. And we now support this weekly winners tournament, which is really kind of fun. It's also like fun to see the different ways that you can view some of the correlations. And my mind just starts going on all these different things. You can see with the weekly winners update for the draft hacker, correlation in any single week and you can choose it, right? So your team sets out and you happen to draft 2 players that play in week 6. You can you can choose up to 3 different weeks, and it will highlight your correlations for you in that. So you can see this team's maybe being built more for week 6. Let's show some week 6 correlations with the players that I've already drafted. And you can tack on multiple other weeks. And instead of showing like a playoff view, so we have a playoff view within the draft hacker, you can see, right? So if I draft Justin Jefferson and I come back and take Aaron Jones within the playoff view, it'll show me, okay, you have those 2 guys from the Green Bay and Minnesota game in week 17. We showed the number of game stacks that you have now by every single week of the season. So it's going to show you from week 1 to week 17 as you draft, right? That number, it's like a ticker. That number will go up. Oh, week 3. Now I got a game stack in week 3 now. Oh, week 7. Got a game stack in week 7. And so as you draft, you can start to prioritize different weeks, right? To try to maximize your upside in any individual week. So really, really fun update for anybody checking out weekly winners. I have not been able to stop drafting the weekly winners because it's just so new, such a fun, so different, man, from any other fantasy football format we've ever played before. And I love the strategy around it. Wrote about it yesterday. We'll definitely be doing tons of content on it as well. But got to get out of here. Got to jump to another quick call. Everybody have a wonderful holiday weekend. Stay safe and all that fun stuff. And we'll be back soon with another episode of Legendary Sickos. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? If you turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.